Yeah. I mean, I think when you ask the American people, forget about your political, ideological entrenchments. What do you think of when you think of Donald Trump? Words like strong, definitive, leadership. Those are the words that people associate with Donald Trump. And this was that on display in an actual, tangible, cause and effect, policy-related matter. You could not have asked for a better result for Donald Trump. And I'm with the former governor here. The swiftness in which this happened, this 180 that Colombia did on this, is mind-boggling, actually, how that actually went down so quickly. But it does create this perception and feeling of momentum for Donald Trump. And really, like in sports, the more wins that you tack up, the harder it is to take you down. And it just empowers Donald Trump. It puts him in a stronger position as he looks at some of these other issues on the foreign policy spectrum that he's dealing with. And it makes him feel untouchable. It makes him feel invincible. And he will be as bombastic and brash and direct as humanly possible because in his experience, it gets the result that he wants.
Yeah, but Governor, Colombia's an easy target. It has really no way to strike back at the U.S. It depends economically very much on the United States. Some of Trump's other targets with these tariff threats don't easily fit into that easy-to-crush category, notably China and Russia. Throw in Denmark, maybe even Mexico. Is there a danger of one of these countries calling Trump's bluff? Because tariffs could hurt the U.S. economy, too.
There's no question. I wouldn't call it a danger, but someone's going to call his bluff. Someone's going to really hold out and drive kind of that wedge. And what the ultimate result of that will be, we'll have to kind of wait and see. And remember, each of these issues is different, right? Denmark doesn't have to sell us anything. I mean, they own Greenland, right? They could just not sell us anything. The agreement with Panama is fixed, and Panama's a bit different because it's really about China. I mean, that's really what this is, making sure China doesn't continue to buy assets and get a stronghold in something that is so vital to the world economy. And don't get me wrong, I agree with Trump on this one very much so. I think that Carter did cut a really bad deal, and I think America should have more control, but we don't. This is the deal that we're kind of stuck with. So he's going to use as much leverage as he can to get some sort of better agreement with a friendly government. I think Secretary Rubio will be really pivotal in this. The new ambassador coming in to Panama is a brilliant guy from South Florida. He's going to have a great team there to negotiate, hopefully, a better result before we get to what happened to Colombia. So every situation is different. Every government's different, whether they're an ally or an enemy, and the strategic importance is different. So as long as they understand that, they take it in more of a surgical, strategic manner, they can still get very good results on all of these. But to your point, you can't just go in with the blunt Colombia strategy on everyone. Eventually, something's going to get blown back on you.
I like that you're already calling it the Colombian strategy. By the way,
Colombia strategy.
By the way, Governor, were you surprised at how nasty it got on social media between Trump and the Colombian president? The Colombian president at one point questioned whether Trump was trying to topple his government, saying, "You don't like our freedom? Fine. I do not shake hands with white enslavers."
So Trump, social media nastiness, is there any other way? I mean, you know what I mean? If you're talking about Trump and social media, it's going to get nasty.
That was the president of Colombia who said that.
And that's just, look, that's unfortunately the method of negotiating this stuff and threatening through social media. And there'll always be a little bit of that. I would hope, again, as he takes each of these situations individually, that they have different strategies. There's a little more of the backroom discussion. You know, the president of Colombia is a fairly unique individual. Like, I think he was like a former guerrilla fighter or, supporter of the guerrilla movement, and he's this leftist progressive. And it was over immigration. It was take your criminals back.
Yeah.
That's a very different argument than, hey, you should sell me something, right? So, of course, it was going to get a little bit nasty because it was something over very contentious, like, hey, these are your citizens. These are your criminals.
Yeah.
They don't belong in America. They're coming back to you. You better let the plane land.
Meanwhile, Kurt, over the weekend, we saw big raids in the Chicago area. About 1,000 people were arrested by ICE agents. Tom Homan told NewsNation today, we're expanding. We're aggressively pushing. We're going to have 2 or 3 days a week when we do these massive roundups. Illinois Senators Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth warned that these deportations, however, aren't just rounding up criminals, people who are suspected of or convicted of convicting crimes, but that they're rounding up even dreamers, who are people who were brought to the U.S. as illegally as kids, veterans, essential workers who pick crops or work construction. They said in this statement, we can all agree we must remove any dangerous individuals from our country who are here illegally. But the mass deportation actions being undertaken by President Trump go far beyond those important goals. We do know a handful of people who are not suspected of crimes were rounded up. It's undoubtedly going to continue.
Yeah, it will. And ultimately, this is what Donald Trump promised the American people he was going to do if elected. This is not a shock or surprise to anybody. This was his #1 campaign pledge, really, in a lot of ways. And, Democrats are going to have to understand that the voters, they voted for Donald Trump. They voted for this. They understand that, yeah, there are going to be some people probably caught up along the way. The American people didn't care. They pulled a lever for Trump anyway because they believe that immigration is a major national problem that Democrats have done a terrible job addressing when they've been in power. And so they're willing to stomach some of these people who fall through the cracks or who might be unduly targeted. They're willing to stomach that and tolerate that because they think the overarching problem of legal immigration supersedes those things. And for Democrats, it's a lot harder to make the case that, a couple dreamers here or there, or a couple people who might be here illegally but didn't commit crimes, but you kind of did commit a crime if you're here illegally. It's like that is a tough message to sell. That's a tough explanation to give the American people. They're not tuning in that closely. They're not paying attention to the nuance of those things. Yes, of course, anything that's being done on a justice system should be done as legally as possible. But Democrats aren't going to win anything making the case for those who fall through the cracks. There's no constituency there for that. That's going to turn the tide on this in terms of public opinion where the American people are at.
Governor, but to your point, Kurt, I think that there are many businesses in this country that do rely on labor from undocumented workers, whether it's construction or farm workers or the poultry plants. Is it at that point when those folks are being rounded up that maybe we're testing the limits of public support?
Well, if I may, I think what Homan is trying to tell folks is within that community, don't harbor these people. If we come and round these folks up because they've done wrong and they're criminals and you're with them and you're here illegally, we're going to get you too. So there's no harboring them. There's no protecting them. Get them, he's trying to force them back out, if you will, into the community so they can be rounded up easier. Because if you're a family here that's part of that dreamers, you're here illegally, but that's it. You haven't committed any crimes. Trust me, those families right now don't want anything to do with other illegals that may have committed crimes. They're saying, you're on your own. I'm not going to put my own family at risk, which actually aids in the process of gathering the criminals. He's also saying it to those businesses. Look, we know businesses hire millions of illegals every single year, but he's reminding those businesses, if you have criminals working for you, you're putting everything at risk now because that's our target. That's our focus. Now, as this goes on, what are they saying? They're doing up to 1,000 a day. We know there's well over 1 million criminals here that they're really prioritizing. They got a lot of work to do to get through the criminal element before they just start going, through kind of I'll call it the harder working and more law-abiding illegal immigrants, as bizarre as that sentence is. But they're really making a statement to those businesses and to those folks in the community. Don't harbor these people and don't be associated. Let us do our job.
Yeah, Kurt, there's a lot of runway there, isn't there?
Yeah, there sure is. And again, the president and his administration want to make the point that they went after the worst first. That's what they promised that they would do, that they would go after the people that have committed crimes, people that are drug affiliated, gang affiliated, weapons affiliated. That's the priority, that's the target, and that's what the American people are behind. It will take on a completely different tone publicly, I think, when you start looking at the people who are actual hardworking, doing the jobs Americans won't do, the laborers, the housekeepers, the service industry, things that actually make the American economy go. If the Trump administration starts coming for that, there will be economic repercussions that will affect the bottom line of the American people, and that's when the debate changes. So the Trump administration has to be very careful not to overreach here, because that's when the stem of public opinion can turn on them.
All right. Kurt Bardella, Chris Sununu, great to have both of you here. Thanks so much.